Okay, this is English 201, week 2, part 9. This is probably going to be the last one for the day. We're obviously not going to make it all the way through this poem today. Um, but I wanted to give you a chance to kind of see the way this works, and I'll pick it up next week. Um, but the poem is very, very difficult. But you have the key now. You have the key to the whole middle section of the poem. You have the key. The first section of the poem is just figuring out a bunch of once you figure out a bunch of old-fashioned bird myths and lookups, and that's research, and we'll talk about that later. But once you figure out some old-fashioned bird myths, and you look up some vocabulary words, the first part of the poem is pretty easy. It's about birds coming to a funeral, who's allowed to go, who's not allowed to go, and what jobs they have when they get there. Then funerals involve public speaking. Someone gets up to say something at the funeral, and what do they say? They say, there's something weird about these birds because somehow there are two of them, but there's also only one. Because there were two birds, a phoenix and a turtle dove, but also they were soulmates. So it's like they shared one soul and they were so faithful and together. It's like they were one and two at the same time. Notice, being one and two at the same time doesn't go together. That's a contrast. That's irony. It's a paradox. How can something be one and two at the same time? But paradoxes are ironic. Paradoxes are a type of irony because of that contrast, right? What contrasts with what? Being one and being two at the same time is contrast. That is irony. You can't be one and not one. Right? It can't be raining and not raining at the same time. You can't be one person and two people at the same time. That's irony. Because it's a contrast. Something doesn't go with something else. The whole middle section of the poem is exploring this irony, where somehow it's possible to be one and two at the same time, even though one and I can't do it. I have to hold. I only have one hand. But the point is, they don't go together. I'll do it like this. You can't be one and two at the same time. It doesn't work. That's irony. So we've seen some metaphors with we're going to compare this bird to a trumpet because they're both loud and announce shit. And we've seen irony where somehow they're one and two at the same time. And we use summary. So we're actually doing real good. So let's take a look at just a little bit more of the poem before we stop for today, just to kind of keep this stuck in our heads. But the rest of the poem, very difficult to understand. But once you know, they just say the same thing over and over again, you can totally handle it. So let's take a look at the stanza we already went over before we continue. So we know, so they loved as love in twain, that's two, had the essence but in one. That's crazy. They're two and one at the same time. Now this next section just says the same thing over again. Two distincts, meaning they're two distinct creatures, they're separate creatures. Division none. So this distinct means that they are two separate creatures. But if you don't have any division between them, if there's nothing to divide them, then they're the same creature. Again, irony. They're two distincts, there are two of them, but there's no division between them. So there's only one of them. Number there in love was slain. Meaning it's like the very idea of numbers has been murdered. Because the whole point of numbers is, like your math teacher will be like, is the answer one or two? You are not allowed in math class to be like, it's both. Can't be both. If the answer is one or it's two, but it cannot be fucking both. So that's why they say number there in love was slain. It's like somebody murdered. When they say number there, it means like math. They're like, these birds somehow, they're two different birds, two distinct birds, but there's no division between them. And so they're just one creature. And it's like, did you murder math? It's a metaphor. These birds being one and two at the same time is like they've murdered math. It's a metaphor. What do they have in common? Numbers don't work anymore. If you murder math, numbers don't work. With these two birds being both two and one, numbers don't work. If you murder math, numbers don't work. So yeah, I think you got it. The point is what does killing math have to do with the birds being two and one at the same time? What do they have? It's a metaphor. What do they have in common? They are destroying the way numbers work. Okay. All right, this is going pretty good. And again, I mentioned this, but these are the lines that are on the gravestones of the penguin. Now, this next part just, again, says the same damn thing all over again in a different way. This drives students crazy because they're like, just say it once. And I understand that. I get that. You should just say it once. But if something is easy to say it once. But if you're talking about something philosophically difficult to explain, You probably do want to say it over and over again in lots of different ways. When you take classes at BMCC, your teachers, if they want to take something simple, they'll just tell you once. The final exam is on May 17th. But if they're talking about something very difficult or confusing, they're going to say it over and over again in different ways. Shakespeare is talking about something difficult and confusing, the idea that somehow you can be one and two at the same time. And so in order to talk about that, which is a really confusing idea, it's going to say it over and over again in lots of different ways. But so let's hear him say it again. But again, you know what the answer is. Somehow they're two and one at the same time. So it makes it easy to follow. So let's hear how he says it a different way. Hearts remote, meaning their hearts are far away from each other, yet not asunder, meaning they're not asunder. So they are separate from each other. They're remote from each other, but they're not asunder, meaning they're not remote from each other. Again, they are two. Their hearts are remote from each other, but they're not asunder, meaning they're not separated at all. Asunder means separate. Hearts remote, they're far apart from each other, and yet they're not far apart from each other. They're somehow two, but also one. Distance and no space was seen. If there's distance between you, but there's no distance between you, right? You see what we're doing? It's the same concept over and over again. There's two birds, but they share one soul, so they're one bird. They're two distinct birds, but there's no division, so they're one bird. It's like math got murdered. Their hearts are far apart, yet not far apart. There's distance between them, but there's also no distance between them. No space was seen twixt this turtle and his queen, but in them it were a wonder. Meaning, and this is a very strange line, but means except, like I'll have everything but vanilla sprinkles. I mean, I'll have everything except vanilla sprinkles. But in them it were a wonder. It means if this thing about being two and one at the same time happened anywhere else with anything else, it would be a wonder. It would be a mind-blowing thing. But with these two birds, it actually makes sense. But in them, it were a wonder, meaning anywhere else except these two birds, you'd be like, how can there be two couches and also one couch? That would be crazy. But when you find out that these two birds are actually one bird, you're like, yeah, that makes sense, because they were soulmates and they were really in love and they were always faithful to each other. They were the perfect couple. It actually kind of makes sense that they were two and one at the same time. Making more sense. We're doing good. This is going really smoothly. Hearts remote, yet not asunder. Distance and no space was seen twixt this turtle and his queen, but in them it were a wonder. So between them love did shine, that the turtle saw his right. Right here means like your rights, like what you deserve, like your civil rights or how you should be treated in society. Rights is it's my right. I deserve it. So between them love did shine, that the turtle saw his right, flaming in the phoenix sight. Either was the other's mine. It's a very confusing line. But the idea is that they had so much love that the turtle saw what the turtle dove saw, what the turtle dove deserved in the phoenix's eye, because it was like you could see it in the eyes, like this is my person, this is the person that I love. Either was the other's mine. If something is mine, it belongs to me, right? So if I have a pen, that pen is mine. But the thing is usually when you own something, it only goes one direction, right? Like if I have a car, that car is mine, right? Because the car belongs to me. I don't belong to the car, right? The car doesn't own me. I own the car. But in love, there's again a paradox. I own something, but that thing also owns me. That's love. It's an idea of love. Either was the other's mine, so that you are mine and I am yours. It normally, when you own something, it goes one direction, but here the love is powerful. It goes two directions. Good. I think I'm probably going to take a little break there, and we will pick it up next time. We have officially done half this poem, and we're doing a really good job, and we'll pick it up next week. Thank you for joining me for week 2 of 201.